When I reached the final lines of my book, being Pyotr Ilyich, it was a revelation for myself, because up to that moment I had transcribed all the audio recordings of my regressions therapy, which were done specific for my healing and then for writing this book. But at the end, I simply felt that right after I finished transcribing the last lines, I felt like, to some extent, I passed the microphone to our Father, to God Himself or herself. And the last lines were simply communicated to me. To some extent, I became a kind of channel in the end. And I felt, of course, that the last lines were not a message only for myself, but for all of you. And as I have already mentioned for so many times already, I have decided to write Being Pyotr Ilyich, especially for sharing with all of you all these truths that were told to me by the Divine. And in the end, I felt that after so many questions that I had during the whole process of healing, so many questions that I think that you also have about the reason of sufferance here on earth, about our life missions, about the relationship between destiny and free will, about living in a physical body, about the other dimensions, about the relationship with the divine, about the relationships with other spirits in the upper dimensions and implicitly here on earth, and so on. I felt that in the end, all these questions, to which I had already received very fascinating and profound answers, were to some extent useless, because in the end, what our Father said to me was something of a completely different quality and at a completely different level of understanding, which did not address my intellect, but my heart, definitely my heart. Because He told me that we all struggle to obtain so many answers. We read so many books. We try to understand the important religious writings in our world. We try to find illuminated masters to follow their steps and to learn from them, and so on. And we expect the great truths to be complicated and very complex. And He told me, no, as a matter of fact, my truths are very simple. And the only reason for all this suffering, for all the terrestrial incarnations, for all these stories that you live here on earth is only to love, to learn how to love. Because unfortunately, so frequently we forget to love, or what we call love is not really love in the purest sense of the word. So in the end, I felt that God asked me, and asked, as a matter of fact, all the potential readers, a moment of silence, a pause. And I think that I have read in one of two spiritual books during the last years that when you do reach a state of illumination and you eventually are able to let the divine light to enter your whole being, you not only feel an immense state of bliss, but you also have a great feeling of silence. I can't boast that I ever became illuminated, it's not the case, but I did manage to have this opportunity to peer for a few seconds by the means of the last lines of Being Pyotr Ilyich, which were dictated to me from above, to peek a bit and to understand how it will be when we will finally manage to reach this final step of illumination and to finally get back home. And one of my best friends, who was one of the first readers of the book, told me, quite amused, that she felt that the end of the book was much too erotic. I have never thought about it, but then taking a few seconds of reflection, I have understood that it might be true, but not in a terrestrial sense, of course. But what I feel with all my being is that at the end of all this suffering and at the end of this huge cycle of terrestrial reincarnations, we will all reach a blessed moment of time when the end of this spiritual path will be an immense act of love with the divine.